The information in this training has been developed by the Governor's Crime Commission's Crime Victim Services Planning Team in consultation with the JJ and CJI planning teams and applies to all GCC applications. At the completion of this module, you will have thorough knowledge of GCC's matching fund requirements, how to calculate the required amount of match funds using GCC tools and resources, and how to request a match waiver if you are not able to meet the funding requirements. Let's get started. Match funding is a portion of a project not supported by the federal fund. These funds must come from other non-federal sources. Match demonstrates a strong non-federal base of financial and partner support for a project and is subject to the same regulations and restrictions as federal funding. GCC grants are funded through a federal share that in most cases makes up 75 to 80% of the total project budget awarded. The remaining 20 to 25% is made up by the match share. Applicants are required to have this portion of their budget covered prior to receiving federal funds, and match contributions may only be applied to one federally funded project one time. GCC match requirements are specific to the funding source. Different funding sources have different match requirements or may not require match at all. Applicants should always read and review the RFA for specific match requirements. Let's use this VOCA application for example. There is a match requirement, so the required contribution amount and any exceptions to the match requirement will be specified. Applicants will also find instructions on how to request a match waiver if they are not able to meet the requirement. At minimum, GCC will consider practical and logical obstacles to providing match. How do you determine your required match? Here is an example to help you understand match requirement. Let's say that you are compiling a budget for your proposed project. You reach a total of $1 million and you know you have an 80% to 20% match rate. This means you will need to secure a $200,000 match to be eligible for the $800,000 match that GCC can provide. The match calculator is a helpful resource when determining or checking your total budget and match requirement for accuracy. Based on your percent match requirement, choose the method of calculation. Either you know the federal share that you need from the GCC and want to know the corresponding match, or you know the total budget and want to know the federal share and match share. Then simply enter the dollar amount in the open field and press calculate. Now that you know how to calculate match, we can look at acceptable forms of match. The most common is a cash match. This form of match could come from a grantee's own funds, cash donations from third parties such as partner organizations, or grants from other government agencies, to name a few examples. Another form of match is in-kind match or non-cash donations to the project. The value of these contributions is what makes up the match, not any cash payment for the contribution. Some examples of in-kind match include property, like land or buildings, equipment, like a copier or telephone, professional services, volunteer time, and more. As you work to identify and secure your match, remember that each match must be properly valued and documented. In-kind match requires fair market assessment and may be a bit more complicated. For property, fair market value must be established by an independent appraiser. The value of the services provided by consultants and other personnel must be consistent with what the grantee would pay their own staff for similar work or with the local market value of the work performed. Time contributed by a volunteer must be valued at the actual work performed. As you work to identify and secure your match, remember that each match must be properly valued and documented throughout the project application in the Grant Enterprise Management System, also known as GEMS. When entering the budget into the Grant Enterprise Management System, applicants will be required to include budget lines for each of their cost categories and items. There will be space to describe if the applicant is using this item as match, the quantity and cost of the item, and whether it is cash or in-kind match. As the amount is entered, the corresponding match required will auto-populate. If the budget line is not match related, use zeros in the cash or in-kind boxes. If the entire line is match, then enter the whole amount in cash or in-kind boxes to attribute the amount to match only and not to federal share. Applicants will also be asked to provide the amount and source of matching funds or request a match waiver. Next, the match waiver request should be attached. The subrecipient may request a waiver up to the full amount of the total project's matching share if the subrecipient is unable to meet the match requirement in full or in part and provides sufficient justification. A full or partial waiver of the match does not increase the federal share of the project. In order to be considered for a waiver, the applicant must meet one of these criteria and provide evidence that they are not able to meet the match requirement. Use the match waiver request instructions as a guide and answer the following questions. Hover over each question for an example of why a match waiver would be needed. Once again, all funding may not require match, so it is important that you read and review the RFA thoroughly. It is also important to note that a match waiver does not increase the federal share. Applicants must submit written requests and upload it as an attachment to the application in GEMS at the time of the application. If you are applying for waivers for multiple projects, upload a separate and individualized request letter in GEMS to each project's application for which you are requesting a waiver. A request for a match waiver must meet the criteria outlined in RFA if there is a match requirement and provide evidence for the need for the match waiver. The request must further explain what steps the organization has taken to meet match requirements, identify additional resources that might be used to provide match, describe how the denial of a match waiver would impact the funded project, and include the following tables to show any of the applicant's existing applications and prior approved match waivers. GCC encourages applicants to use the GCC website for resources while completing the project application. Simply go to our website and click the teal Resources tab. This will lead you to several helpful links, including the match funding calculator and how to request a match waiver. Please be advised that upon review, the Governor's Crime Commission reserves the right to reduce budgets and request budget adjustments at its discretion. You will learn more about adjustments and modifications in Module 5. Module 5 will cover adjustments and modifications for the fall 2021. This concludes the Project Match module. Thank you for participating.